Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Next Man Up with MJ Hurley. I am your host, MJ Hurley. This is episode 40 of Next Man Up with MJ Hurley, and we have been gone for a while. For that, I apologize. Was working on my live show, Third Down Thursdays. I was working on, school. I'm still in college, all of that good stuff. But I am at Bradley at school for the summer, and with nothing to do other than work and work on my sports work, here we are and we are back. So what I have for you today, I'm going to do, a couple rants as I do. But for the most part, we have two interviews today with two fantastic NBA writers and content creators. And with the NBA playoffs starting, I wanted to get a lot of content focused around that. Football is in the off season, baseball is in the early swing of things. So for the time being, I'm going to be trying to do a lot centered around the NBA playoffs. I will do my best to keep this once a week. If I have more content, I'll produce more. If I'm struggling, I will make sure to let you know about that. But for the summer, for the time being, you are also getting the first video form of Next Man Up with MJ Hurley. This is still going to be on all your podcast platforms. So if you are originally from there and listening there, hello and welcome back. But with that being said, before I get into our first interview, I do want to talk a little bit about my friendly hometown, Green Bay Packers. This is something I've said on my live show. This is something I've said anywhere where anyone will listen, talking about the Green Bay Packers and the Aaron Rodgers situation. Basically, my message, because I know people when they see this are going to want me to talk about Aaron Rodgers. I've talked about it plenty. If you really want to hear it, go listen to the Cheeseheads podcast. We did something about it last week on the Primetime Sports Talk YouTube channel. You can go there, get my full reaction, right? But realistically, all the speculation around Aaron Rodgers, the only thing I want you to focus on is, did the message come from Aaron Rodgers' mouth himself? If not, I don't believe it until it comes from his mouth. I don't believe that he's not going to be our quarterback until he doesn't show up for some sort of organized team activity. So until then, listen to Aaron Rodgers, RELAX, relax, take a chill pill, and let's focus on how incredible this team will be in 2021. So with that, the first interview I'm going to have for you today is going to be Harrison Faigen, who is a LA Lakers beat writer. We had plenty to talk about with the very exciting play-in game the Warriors and Lakers had last night. Full disclosure, this is being recorded on Thursday, May 20th. That's when the interview was being recorded. You'll probably hear this on Saturday, May 22nd. So we don't know what's going to happen in any of the play-in games that are to be played on Friday, but we did our best to summarize everything else. So with that, my interview with Harrison right now. Such a busy time for the Lakers. So before we get rolling, if you just want to introduce yourself to everybody listening, give us a little summary of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. And like I told you before we went on air, I wouldn't have said yes if I didn't have time to do it. It's been, it's been a crazy couple, like a day in Lakerland, but not as crazy as it would have been if the team had, been forced to play an actual do or die play-in game by losing last night. And so anyway, my name's Harrison Faigen, and I cover the Lakers for Silver Screen and Roll. I run that website, which is SB Nation's Lakers community, and I've been covering the team since 2014-ish. Well, actually, really 2012, I guess. Like my first day was the day that Dwight Howard left, but I've been really blogging on like a semi-professional basis since probably like 2014, 2015, I'd say. And I've had credentials since 2015 Summer League.
Nice. So, I mean, this has been a bit of an odd season for the Lakers. LeBron and AD pretty much played half of their games this year. So before we get to what was one of the most exciting games of the season last night, give me a little summary of the Lakers season, because nobody was expecting them to be the 7th seed. That's where they are now. So give us a little summary there.
Yeah, I mean, injury ravaged might be the quickest way to describe the way that this season has gone for the Lakers. It's just like you mentioned, they've missed both of their stars for large chunks of time. LeBron and AD both, I forget exactly how many games they both ended up missing, but it was for both of them by far career high in games missed. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, I got a lot of flack from Lakers fans early on in the season because I said, look, I understand that this team has said all the right things, that they care about this season, whatever. They're going to prioritize health first. And I predicted predicted them to actually finish as the 4 seed. So I also did not predict a 7 seed, but I didn't predict this level of injuries. I thought that, they'd miss some games for rest and things like that. And who knows, maybe that would have happened. But, fate forced the Lakers into resting them for long chunks of time. And yeah, I mean, this team they showed a lot of heart, a lot of grit defensively. They ended up finishing with the number 1 defense in the NBA, despite missing probably their 2 best defensive players for most of the year. It's very clear that Frank Vogel can coach on that end. And then offensively, they have not been as good as a team, even with LeBron and AD, as a team as you would expect for a team with LeBron and AD. Some of that is down to the center rotation that I'm sure that we'll discuss on this podcast and all of that. But yeah, extremely up and down season, extremely just really a roller coaster of emotions, of just good and bad basketball, sometimes all in the same game. It's been a very weird year. And I like, to be honest, I've covered terrible Lakers lottery teams. I covered a team that was great basically from start to finish last year. I've never covered anything quite like this. It's truly been a unique season.
So with that unique season, we had a very unique game last night, being the first rendition of the NBA's play-in tournament. Give me your thoughts before we get to the actual game. Give me your thoughts when the NBA announced the play-in tournament. What did you think of it then? And then we'll get to your thoughts afterwards in a little bit.
Yeah, so my first thoughts were like, wow, I don't understand this. You're telling me about a lot of different seeds doing a lot of different things. And like to be honest, I don't think that I fully understood the concept until about 2 to 3 weeks ago, when it became very clear that the Lakers were really like a legitimate threat to end up in this thing. And, at that point, honestly, it's not that complicated. I just saw a lot of people listing a lot of different seeds doing different things. And like the part of my brain that hates math was like, this is not relevant to me. I'm excising all of this from my brain. I think that, people have made a lot of LeBron's comments about the play-in guy should be fired and, made jokes about he deserves a raise, whatever. Like, I am definitely more in the second camp. I think that as much as, this 3 of the 4 games were terrible. Outside of the Lakers game, for the most part, the Spurs one actually got a little bit more competitive, Spurs versus Grizzlies down the stretch. So that one kind of 1.5 good games out of 4. And, but I think that the concept itself, I don't know that you can necessarily just judge it, especially on those first 4 games. Now we have the actual do or die games coming up,
right?
And those should be incredible theater, I believe those are going to be on Friday. And so I think the concept, though, you fully judge it based on what it did to the end of the regular season. And that was like, all of a sudden we had these Lakers Mavericks games that meant something. We had that Lakers Blazers game that was an incredible game down the stretch of like 2 stars and Anthony Davis and Damian Lillard trading counter punches down the stretch and trying to outduel each other and kind of end up in that like last minute driver's seat to avoid the play-in. And so, you have stuff like that. You have other games in the East that were more meaningful as a result. You have the Warriors Grizzlies playing essentially a de facto play-in game, with a week left in the season, to a play-in game to not end up in the play-in game, or to end up in the better play-in game spot. And so I just think all of that stuff, it curbed tanking, I think, to a degree. A lot of these teams, like people have talked about, the Wizards, maybe they bow out. Maybe they start to, get rid of pieces at the trade deadline. And, maybe on some level, sometimes that's smarter. But as someone who enjoyed this last month of the season and felt like it was more relevant than a lot of last months of NBA seasons usually are, I think the concept all around, even outside of, one-eyed, one-leg LeBron hitting a game winner over Steph from Steph Curry range last night, I think even outside of that, the concept was a resounding success.
So the shot that everybody's talking about, first of all, do you actually believe that he was seeing 3 rims?
No, of course not. But I one thing that I have always respected about LeBron is he understands what he is playing for and who he is chasing and what he has to do in the moment. Like, you think that Jordan didn't build up some of this stuff in the moment to mythologize himself to begin that Paul Bunyan-esque tale? Like, LeBron, was he seeing 3 rims? Probably not, but it's a good line. And do I buy that he couldn't see that well? Like, as someone who's been poked in the eye before, yes, he probably, I would imagine his vision was a little blurry. I don't think that it was like a cartoon where there were like two rims circling the one that he actually hit, like something Looney Tunes Space Jam or whatever. But, you know, I think his vision was probably impacted. We saw him blinking. We saw the tears in his eyes. If you've ever been poked in the eye, you know that does affect you. I don't know if he was seeing three rims necessarily, but I do buy that it was impacted. And if you watch that game, you could see, you know, for most of it, that did not look like the LeBron James that we've kind of come to expect. And I think that is more due to he's not at 100% from the ankle. That's pretty clear. He's clearly healthy enough to play, clearly healthy enough to make an impact, even with just one eye. And according to some reports, just one leg. And, you know, I actually, it's funny, as I realized, I was 2 minutes late for this Zoom. And it was because I realized mid the process of trying to Photoshop LeBron missing a leg and with an eye patch on for his game. And I was going to be like, this is what I'm telling my kids LeBron did last night. And because I feel like that's what The Last Dance did, right? Like, it made you be like, oh my God, like Jordan played that game after stomach removal surgery. Like he vomited out his entire, you know, lower abdominal tract and was still able to hit that shot over Brian Russell. I always forget which one of the Russells that played in that era that actually was, but it doesn't matter. And like we mythologize these guys, and that was LeBron. He used the same line in his post game that he did with Rachel Nichols on the thing. He just, in his head, he's like, all right, this sounds good. I'm going to make this joke. I don't ever think that he's being fully serious when he's saying stuff like that. He is hyperbolizing what he's going through.
But I do think if they would have lost that game, he would have showed up to the Grizzlies game with an eye patch on.
Oh, 100%. And like he would have shown up with an eye patch, and he like when he eventually won by like, I don't know, like dunking on Jaren Jackson Jr. to like close out the game, he would have been like hashtag Pirate King, hashtag like, oh, like the gods bless me with a spare, like hashtag like 1020 vision. I don't know. Like, he would have had some corny dad hashtags for it. Now that we're talking about this, I'm almost disappointed that we didn't get that reality.
You can say what you want about how dramatic he is and flopping or anything, but he knows how to use the media and his social media. He's very good at that.
Yes, no, he is as deft at controlling that aspect of it as I honestly really anyone since Kobe and maybe anyone since Jordan.
Yeah. So with the Lakers winning that game, they're set to face the Phoenix Suns. First of all, when does that series start?
Sunday afternoon.
Okay, so I believe aren't the Lakers the betting odds favorite right now?
I believe so. Last I checked, I think they were minus 300 at the opening line, but I think it has shifted a little bit since then, as some people were like, hey, that's actually not a bad price for the Suns against like a kind of banged up Lakers team that's like one injury away from being the underdogs, you know, like.
So what is your prediction? Give me the breakdown. LeBron, I think in year 18 versus Chris Paul in 16. That's a very good storyline. And the poor Phoenix Suns, who their the reward for getting the 2 seed and winning 51 games is here's LeBron and the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why the Clippers and Nuggets, ducked this, because the downside is, you have these great seasons and whatever, and then you potentially lose in the first round. Like, I understand. Like, Lakers fans are apoplectic about this. They're like, why wouldn't you want to face them early when they're potentially weak before they've gelled? Why wouldn't you, if you're going to have to beat them anyway, this is cowardly. Like, I get why these teams did it, because for these teams, like, if you're the Suns and you make it to the second round, like, and you get Coach of the Year, does Monty Williams get an extension? Probably, does their GM, like, I believe that's James Jones right now, like, does he get an extension out of this? But if you lose in the first round, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that was a little bit of a fool's gold season type thing. So, like, I understand why teams ducked this and did not want this eventuality. Someone was going to have to face the Lakers, and I get why a lot of teams were like, hey, I don't want that to be us. And so as far as the series goes, I agree that the Lakers should be the favorites. I was giving my boss like a hard time. And my boss is like a gigantic Suns fan. And I was giving him a hard time in Slack this morning about like the underdog, we believe Lakers, and like all this stuff that's your name, kind of
Harrison. That's your name on Twitter.
Yeah, we believe Faigen. Like, I'm just saying, Warriors fans, I'm convinced, want to have me killed for using the "we believe" thing against them. But look, we used it last year all throughout the playoffs. Like, it became, the Lakers have aggregated that slogan. It is ours now. Yeah.
Oh, That's a bold statement. When you have, okay, I love Baron Davis to death, and I've been a Warriors fan for a long time. I don't want to kill you for using the slogan, but comparing LeBron and AD to Baron Davis and Jason.
No, look, I mean,
like
it's all tongue in cheek. Like we did it last year at Silver Screen and Roll, just to take you behind the curtain. And I don't want to get too far off track here, so I apologize.
Yeah, no,
but no, to take you behind the curtain a little bit, it was more of just like, there were so many people picking the Blazers. It's like, oh, best 8 seed of all time. Like Dame's a real superstar. He stayed in Portland. Like there were so many people that wanted the story of Damian Lillard, like upsetting this kind of Lakers team that very clearly only tried in about 2 bubble games. They're like, oh, could the Lakers be in trouble? And it's like, no, they're fully healthy and they have LeBron and AD combined with like maybe the best defensive backcourt to sick on someone like Dame Lillard. Like, it's like, no, the Blazers are going to be lucky to make this not a sweep. And the Blazers did that. And, the Lakers, imposed their will from that point on. And like Blazers fans get mad at me when I'm like, Dame quit by like halftime of game 3 in that series. But it's true. Like before the injuries, they realized that they just did not have it. Like you could see that team start to lay down. And, it was just funny. Like every round, it was like the Rockets people were picking. And, like I don't think that many people picked the Nuggets, but then the Heat became like a chic pick. And it's like, you guys are like every single series, we're having this stupid argument about like, oh, like the Lakers have 1 and 2, but 3 through 11, that might benefit, like that might benefit this other team, as if 3 through 11 is usually who wins championships in the NBA. No. So anyway, that's where the we believe thing came from. It was a tongue-in-cheek like dig at, how many people were disbelieving in this very clear, I don't know, what's the opposite of an underdog? The favorite? An overdog? I don't know. But the Lakers have to probably be the most heavily favored 7th seed in history going into a matchup with the 2 seed. And like, there's a lot of context to that. The Lakers would not have been the 7th seed if they were healthy all year. And, the Suns, I think, out of the teams that could have gotten the Lakers, you almost feel bad for the Suns because they're the one that probably matches up the poorest with them. And like, they just don't, I like,
they don't
maybe
have anyone
LeBron's limited. Yeah, maybe LeBron's limited all series and the Suns can kind of credibly somewhat defend him and, at least limit him a little bit. But Anthony Davis without LeBron, just destroyed the Suns a week ago in a game that the Suns were trying in. And so I just don't think that they have the matchups to handle this series. Like, I would be surprised if AD didn't average 30 in this first round. I just don't think that the Suns have the horses. I think they're a nice story. I don't think it's going to be a sweep by any means. Like, I think they'll make the Lakers fight for it. They're a good team and their success is legitimate. I'm not like a Suns or fool's gold guy, but I just think the Lakers have the advantage in the matchups here.
Well, it's interesting because even last night, LeBron and AD were extremely inefficient.
Horrible for like 3 quarters.
Yeah. And even in the third quarter, when they were getting turnovers like crazy, they just kept missing shots on the other end. Like given, I think it was 10 turnovers by the Warriors in the third quarter, Lakers should have blown them out. And
it is a miracle that the Lakers played good enough defense to win that game with how poorly they played on offense.
Yeah, it was really illuminating how they can play from Lakers standards so bad and still win. Granted, you get heroics from LeBron. That's a game the Lakers should win almost every time because it's a Warriors team without Klay Thompson, Kelly Oubre, Pascal still isn't fully healthy. So, that's a Warriors team that's hurting a lot. The Lakers should win that game, but still it's impressive with how bad they were in the first half.
Yeah, but no, the Lakers were justifiably the favorites in that game. The Warriors gave them everything they had. I think they frankly played a lot harder, at least on offense, during the first half. The Lakers were kind of content to like, we're going to out-talent them tonight. And, it just didn't work. Like they ended up having to actually play the matchups and try and give themselves, like strategic advantages and things like that. And then once they did that, it was like, oh yeah, this is why they were the favorites. Yeah. But it basically took them 3 quarters to be like, hey, like, again, I think Andre Drummond's catching a little too much flack today. I don't think that he was the problem necessarily against the Warriors, but I don't think he was the solution. And look, it's not disrespectful to Andre Drummond to say AD is a better center than him. He just is. That's just a fact. And, like Anthony Davis, when healthy, is the best center in the league, in my opinion. Like, him the Lakers being better with him as the small ball five is not some like, Frank Vogel just broke basketball and discovered, this new like groundbreaking strategy thing. It's just like they want to save him the pounding. And, I think that their thought going into that game was, hey, let's see if we can impose our will on the glass, get extra possessions. With how poorly they were shooting, like, at least in theory, the Drummond thing made sense because maybe you get a couple extra possessions, then you score on second chances, stuff like that. It just wasn't working. And Draymond that was genuinely one of the best defensive games I've ever seen anyone play last night. Yeah. He really gave the Warriors a chance to win there, and is, incredible. And he will be a deserved Hall of Famer when he goes in.
I'd also like to give a shout out to Kent Bazemore, who I think had 5 steals last night.
He was a Laker. He was a revenge game against his 3 teams ago team that, rescinded his qualifying offer and didn't keep him.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, the Warriors actually traded him to the Lakers for Steve Blake to try and make a playoff run. And he actually played amazing. He was one of the highlights of that season. All of us were like, hey, the Lakers got to bring him back. And then they're like, no, actually, we're going to rescind his qualifying offer to I think they were chasing Melo that summer. I forget who it was. It was Melo or Lamar. It was one of those doomed free agency pursuits. And they rescinded his extremely cheap qualifying offer to give themselves the cap space for a guy who had not agreed to sign yet. It made absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but yeah, it was interesting to me last night watching the amount of times that Drummond would just post up, and every time he did, watching it from a Warriors fan perspective, I got excited.
Yeah, you're like, thank God.
If that's how the Lakers want to end a possession, with Andre Drummond just doing whatever it is he decides to do in the post, please, by all means, go for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, that's part of the kind of weird, that's part of the weird dynamic of this season, is that Andre Drummond, did he have a physical advantage in that matchup? Yes, but he's also not a guy that, you don't it's that old clip of Stephen A. Smith talking about, current internet legend Kwame Brown. It's like he doesn't have a post move that he can commit to memory. That is an accurate description of Andre Drummond. And look, I like him well enough. He seems like an extremely nice guy. I think he catches too much flack. I don't think that he's been as bad as people want to blame him for. But if you have LeBron and AD on the floor, and even to some degree Dennis Schroeder, why are you ending in possession with Andre Drummond? It's I get that Draymond is guarding AD, so that's not isolating him does not necessarily really play into an advantage for you and stuff like that. But isolating one of the worst finishers at the rim among guys his size in NBA history is also not the strategy there. And, I think sometimes there's a push and pull because you want to, as a guy that big, he probably feels like I can take advantage. You want to give him a couple shots hey, he gets the shots off every time, at least. Maybe this will be one of the nights where he shoots 70% instead of 50%, but more often than not, it's going to be closer to that 50%. And at that point, it's just not efficient, or less than that. And it's just not efficient offense. And so, yes, I agree that the Lakers somewhat played into the Warriors' hands by doing that. I also think that Drummond has shown questionable decision-making at times. I'm not sure that all of those were called post-ups for Andre Drummond. Yeah. And, you see the last one where he almost does the splits, and Frank Vogel had seen enough at that point. He can say everything that he wants to after the game about, I thought Andre played a good game. Actions speak louder than words, and he got him out of there pretty quickly and was like, all right, let's get Wes in there. Let's go. We're going small.
There was also a clip of Dennis Schroeder yelling at Drummond because Drummond was just flat out missing defensive rotations too. He was just leaving Kevon Looney wide open, which I love Kevon Looney to death, but the only time he really scores is when he's wide open.
Yeah, that was something that AD was almost astoundingly honest about that last night, where he was just like, yeah, Andre's not used to making those rotations, so that's kind of our bad. It's well, I mean, should he, I understand that you're playing small, so he is making different rotations than he normally would. He's making some rotations that a 4 generally might make, or a 3, depending on the guy that he's guarding and where he is or whatever. But also maybe don't put him into that position in a kind of do or die game at that point, and I mean, Frank Vogel's strategy, and he alluded to this after the game, has generally been, we go into each series playing our style, and if you can beat us that way, then we will adjust. But psychologically, we are not going to change before the series. And I think that kind of came back to bite them a little bit last night, in that it was only one game. And so you saw him kind of make that, like, honestly, the Lakers may have lost that game if it was not a play-in round, and just kind of taken the L and been like, all right, we're going to get as big of a sample size on this as we can. If it isn't working, then by game 2, we'll go small. And so like they, you know, we saw them, they lost in the first game of their first 2 series last year, where, you know, they kind of got outplayed. They come out, they make adjustments by the second game, and then they win the next 4. And that has kind of been Frank's MO, is we don't adjust until you make us adjust. And so I think that, you know, I think philosophically, I sort of agree with that. And I understand why psychologically that's the message that you would want to give to your team. It's just in a play-in game, it's like, maybe he should have made an exception and just been like, hey guys, like, AD, we just need you to play the 5 all game tonight. Like, and we're just going to play, you know, Wes and Markieff Morris and, you know, whoever. Like, honestly, you know, part of it might've been that Markieff Morris, I think, is shooting like one of his last like 33s or something insane like that. And if he was shooting better, I think we would have seen him get some run earlier in that game. But, you know, that, like, in place of Trez at some point. But yeah, that hasn't been working. And so that's a whole other subplot.
So who in the West scares you the most if you're the Lakers?
Clippers, for sure. And as much as, you know, all of us Lakers fans gave them a hard time for the most blatant ducking of a playoff opponent I think I've ever seen, you know, and that is in a vacuum, that is hilarious. But I understand why these two teams don't want to play each other, because they both match up with each other better than any other West team does. The Clippers, especially for the Lakers this year, like, they have multiple wings that you can throw at LeBron James. They have guys that can somewhat credibly guard Anthony Davis. Like, that might sound laughable, but AD has looked at times a little limited. And Ivica Zubac, you know, when he was with the Lakers, he had some games where he defended AD decently well. Now, AD still probably dropped like 30, but, you know, Ivica made him work for it. And the Clippers have some guys that, in theory, should be able to make the Lakers 2 stars work, especially LeBron in terms of Kawhi and PG. And, you know, the Lakers don't really have guys to defend them. You know, like, their strategy last season was on big wings. Okay, like, you know, LeBron will play them some, AD will play them some, and they'll light up KCP for, you know, 10 minutes a game or whatever, and hopefully they just don't attack that matchup too much. You know, KCP is a great defender. He's just not, he's not big.
He's a guard.
And so, yeah. So, and like Markieff Morris at times would get those assignments to mixed results. And, you know, obviously they made it work well enough to win the title, but they didn't have to go through the Clippers to do that. And I would have been very curious, you know, they had figured out some answers, but especially with the AD on Kawhi matchup, I actually think AD plays that matchup really well. But is that something that you want to do for an AD coming off of calf and Achilles injuries, you know, in an unprecedented postseason gauntlet? Probably not. And then that means, you know, first 30 minutes of the games before the Lakers go to that's advantage Clippers. Or do you risk him getting hurt? Do you risk LeBron doing it when he clearly can't cut and move as well on defense right now? You know, again, I think he's healthy enough to play, but he does not look fully himself yet. No. And so that is the team that would worry me most if I was the Lakers. The other teams, I feel like the Lakers have enough of a definitive strategic advantage that they can kind of bludgeon even with those guys not at full strength. Where against the Clippers, I do feel like that's the one series where I would consider them a pretty definitive underdog. Not that they couldn't win, but just the circumstances that they're dealing with combined with the Clippers kind of matchup advantages. I would not necessarily pick the Lakers in that series as things are right now. You know, we could be having a different conversation in a week if the Lakers sweep the Suns. You know, like, it's just going to depend on how LeBron and AD are looking.
And even just looking at LeBron last night, he was having trouble blowing by Andrew Wiggins and Juan Toscano-Anderson, which
where those are guys that, like, healthy LeBron just implodes. Like, those guys are, you know, those guys are stains on the windshield.
Exactly. And then, so to your point, if he's at the same percentage, let's give him 85. If he's still at the same 85%, when you give Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, it doesn't look like he'd be able to just blow by them. And granted, he was hitting some threes last night. He was, you know, his game can change depending on what he's looking at. But I would much rather have LeBron James with a full head of steam going to the basket than pump faking and shooting threes.
Yeah, and like there are things that they can do. Like the Lakers could try to go small and post him up. Like he's still stronger than those. He's stronger than PG. He's probably, I would say about even, maybe a little stronger with Kawhi, but that's definitely not a definitive advantage. And
Yeah.
Kawhi is obviously an incredible defender. I'm not sure that posting up LeBron on him is some gigantic advantage. But there are things that the Lakers could do to kind of, outside of having him dribble drive. But yeah, are those the things that he has traditionally been best at? No. And so, you just wonder, is he going to be able to get closer to that 100%? I think that winning that game last night was huge, if nothing else, because it gives him another 3 days between matchups. And, getting a team like the Suns, where he's probably not going to have to go supernova to beat them, I think also will help.
So then in the East, I've got 2 questions for you. Number 1, who's your favorite over there? And then to the same extent, who scares you the most for the Lakers, assuming, in a world where the Lakers are themselves and get to the finals, which I still think they're probably the favorite, at least in my opinion. I don't know about betting wise or what might actually happen, but if they were to make the finals, who scares you the most and who's your favorite over there?
My answer is the same for both questions. I think it's the Nets. I think a lot of us have been guilty of overthinking it all year. I understand that they haven't had the continuity, they haven't had the health, whatever, but if they get something reasonably approximating health, I understand the defensive concerns. I'm not saying they're like a bulletproof favorite to make it out of the East, but if I had to pick right now, they're just so ridiculous offensively that if they can, just get teams to try and get into a scoring, battle with them, they're going to win that 9 times out of 10. And I'm just not sure that these other teams, maybe Embiid can just so thoroughly dominate them in the post that it makes a difference, or, maybe Giannis really is as good as he showed in their last 2 regular season matchups. But I just feel like the Nets have enough that they should definitely be the favorites. And again, it goes back to that multiple big wings thing. Not necessarily defensively, because I don't think KD's been that quite that this season.
Right.
And James Harden obviously is, he's a great, super underrated at this point, post-up defender, but not that great anything otherwise. Kyrie's not a guy that scares you in any way defensively, but they have those wings on offense that I just wonder, the Lakers have a great defense, obviously. I think that they signed Drummond specifically for this matchup just to get them second chances in the paint. We saw even without LeBron and AD, he destroyed the Nets inside, and also, keeps him from going to the Nets and them having a semi-competent center. So, I think there was twofold motivations for that. And I do think that the Lakers could win that series. But again, it's just with the health stuff, it's really hard for me to pick them to win the title right now.
So is that's the biggest reason, is just simply health?
Yeah, I think if this Lakers team was healthy, I think they'd be the definitive favorite, and they should be. But I just am not sure that they're going to get there. And I think that the health is so, hurt their attempts to generate continuity, that I just think that between all of it, it just feels like a little too much is stacking up. But again, this is why they're the We Believe Lakers. They're the plucky underdogs that could, surpass all these outside idiot pundits like me's expectations.
And to be honest, when you go past LeBron and AD, there are a lot of guys on that team that the majority of NBA fans are not name recognizable just by looking at him on the court. KCP has some recognition because of some memes about him, stuff like that. Obviously Caruso and Kuzma, but they don't have even the name firepower that the Nets do, where most NBA fans can go 6-7 guys deep on the Nets. So I mean, I won't give you full use of the We Believe slogan, but I'll give you partial use.
I think as a Warriors fan, the nicest thing you could do right now is that at least endorse us to use it if the Warriors get eliminated. Full endorsement. You guys have tentative, permission. You are the We Believe Lakers until there's another We Believe Warriors team.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
I'll take it away if the Warriors are the 8 seed and they start giving the Jazz a run. But that's probably
yeah. I mean, at that point, I think that we have 2 We Believes, simultaneously, because look, I tweeted at Unstoppable Baby, the the Golden State of Mind, the Golden State Warriors SB Nation account. I was like, see you guys in the Western Conference Finals, because they're good. I don't know that they're actually going to make it that far, but I really do think that they could give the Jazz a run.
I mean, they've played well against the Jazz this year, and then if they give the Jazz a run, And the
And the
Lakers,
Jazz, while we're talking about health, the only part of the reason that I still really think the Lakers have a chance is it really doesn't seem like anyone's fully healthy right now.
true.
Even the Warriors, their guys that are out there are healthy, but they lost 2 guys, and maybe that made them better in the end. But that's a pretty short rotation, and that's going to start to catch up with them at some point. And the Clippers have been banged up. Ibaka was supposed to be their big AD stopper, or at least AD limiter, and now he has he's been out forever and did not look good when he came back. And so it's just all of these teams have major health questions.
So I'm just looking, let's say Golden State and LA both win. That gives the Warriors either Denver or the Clippers probably. And if I see a Denver Golden State semifinals, for Golden State, I'm not mad at that.
Yeah, I feel like that again is like that's a series that I think that the Warriors could win.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I could conceivably see.
No, I mean there's a path. If the Nuggets just have the Clippers number then the
Clippers would terrorize the Warriors. That would not even that would just be 0 out of 10 not a good time for the Golden State Warriors. But no, I could see them getting by the Nuggets. Because they've played, as they did last night, they've played teams with dominant big men and been okay. It's when you have, a dominant wing defender who can just take out Steph Curry. Even then, with Dillon Brooks the other day. Even with Dillon Brooks just being glue on Steph Curry, Warriors got him to foul out. So,
well, Dillon Brooks is also happy to help with that a lot of the time.
He's like, here. Let me help.
I'm pretty sure that man fouled out of a summer league game. I think
you're kidding.
No, I think you get 10 fouls in summer league, and I'm reasonably certain I saw him foul out in a summer league game.
Hold up, I want to look this up
because I was there with a friend who's an Oregon alum, and he was furious with the refs' calls on Dillon Brooks. I'm like, dude, it's a summer league game. It's you're good. It doesn't matter. His career is going to be fine. But yeah, I'm 90% sure that this happened.
Oh yeah, Dillon Brooks did foul out of a summer league game in 2017.
I knew it.
Oh my gosh.
I believe you get 10 fouls in summer league, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Wow. That's just kind of sad.
Yeah.
I love it though. All right. Well, I think that's all I have for you today, Harrison. Like I said, thank you for taking time out of what's been a busy week for you. I appreciate. Thank you to the Lakers last night for winning so we could do this. Lastly, give the good people a place where they can find you, follow you on social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so you can find all of my work on Silver Screen and Roll, which is, you can search that in your podcast feeds for, our podcast that I'm on once a week as of right now, generally. But we have a daily show. We have daily shows. And then the majority of my work is written. That's on silverscreenandroll.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at HMFAIGEN. That's at HMFaigen, my initials and name.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, sir. And best of luck to the 50-50 We Believe Lakers in the playoffs.
Yeah, best of luck to the We Believe Warriors. We could have an all We Believe conference finals. That'd be exciting.
I'll take it. Thank you very much, Harrison, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to have you. Whenever I talk to beat writers, I enjoy it because they know way more just about the incredible specifics about a team than I do. I can talk about a lot of generalities with the majority of a lot of the teams in the NBA, MLB, NFL. But talking to a beat writer, it's been Harrison's job for the last 7 years to cover the LA Lakers, and that shows. So thank you, Harrison, for all of your takes and fairly realistic takes as well. He didn't just come out and say the Lakers are going to win it all because they're the best, blah, blah, blah. No, he's realistic about the injuries, and he's realistic about the possibility that the Lakers might struggle due to those injuries. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Harrison. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. Before I continue to our second and last interview of the day, I do want to talk a little bit about the Golden State Warriors. Something I've talked about on the live show. And since this is, my first episode back on the podcast, I want to talk about my favorite teams. That's always a good way to get rolling. So the Golden State Warriors went toe-to-toe with the defending NBA champions in what was the most exciting of the first NBA play-in games ever. First of all, I love the play-in games. Like Harrison said, and like you'll hear from Mo in a little bit, It definitely takes down tanking, which I absolutely hate. It drives me crazy. And it definitely makes the end of the season more exciting. So with that, the Warriors play-in game, it shows that Steph Curry, you can, as Frank Vogel said, you can throw the kitchen sink at the man and he'll still drop 35 on you. He dropped 37 in a play-in game against the Lakers where they knew he was the only man who was going to beat them. Did he get caught up in AD in the last play? Couldn't get that final three off with 2.1 seconds left? Yes. Is that a condemnation on who he is as a player and one of the greatest, if not the greatest point guards of all time and the best shooter that the NBA has ever seen? No. He is still all of those things. He still should have been in the MVP conversation this year because of the numbers he put up compared to his unanimous MVP season. He was better in almost every measurable category. And yet this year, because he didn't have the same pieces around him and he wasn't on a record-breaking team, he was not a unanimous MVP. And yet Nikola Jokic seems to be the unanimous pick for MVP this year. We'll see how that goes. But no matter what, you get a team next year with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, most likely James Wiseman. Then you add a top 5 pick coming from the Timberwolves, a first-round pick of the Warriors of their own, and then Jordan Poole, Kelly Oubre, Kevon Looney, and a lot of other pieces. That is a exciting and that is a dangerous team. And I will say it on here, as I said on my live show, the Golden State Warriors will be the top seed in the NBA's Western Conference next year, and I have no doubt about that. So with that, the second interview I have for you is going to be my good friend Mo, who had the best Zoom background of the day by far. He's recently started a Twitch channel talking about the NBA, breaking down some clips, breaking down some film. He made his own website, and he has worked for Bleacher Report, The Athletic, and he's worked for a bunch of NBA teams as well. So a guy who is very well versed in the game of basketball, very knowledgeable. Let's hear what he has to say about the upcoming NBA playoffs. All right, so with me today is Mo Dahkil. First of all, Mo, thank you for coming on the show, agreeing to do this with me. You are a man of many hats, it appears, at least from your Twitter bio. So if you want to start off before we get rolling into some NBA debates and just give me a little bit about yourself, give me a little bit about your career history and what you do right now.
Okay, well, I'm a former NBA video coordinator. I was in the league for 8 years. 2 different stints with the Clippers, and sandwiched in between that is a run with the Spurs. So fortunately, didn't get to win a championship with the Spurs. That would have been kind of cool.
Yeah.
But been around the game for a long time. Before that, was working in colleges and things like that. So been in basketball really since I was 19, and that's kind of troublesome because now I'm old, so I don't feel too good about that. Now I'm turned NBA analyst. I write for Bleacher Report. I podcast for The Athletic. I'm starting my own Twitch stream and doing some video breakdowns there. I do breakdowns on Twitter. Basically, I'm a basketball nerd.
I love it. And I see that you founded your own website too.
Yeah, that was how I got people to figure out who the hell I was. I don't post too much on there anymore. It's called thejumpball.net. And that was back when if you go and read that stuff, I gotta apologize in advance. No editor, and I need editors badly. So there's times where you're gonna read stuff going like that sentence makes absolutely 0 sense. And yeah, that's kind of what happened on the jump ball. And then now I'm lucky that I get paired with editors at Bleacher Report, and they're able to save me a bunch. You know, if you're a writer, man, big ups to your copy editors.
Oh yeah, they are saviors, especially when you're writing it, 2 a.m. And like you said, sometimes sentences don't make sense when they come out. They make sense to us, but
yeah, it's just funny. I just feel bad for I warn my editors always. I'm like, you're gonna read some stuff from me and be like, this dude does not. It's shocking. English is his first language.
I love it. So Mo, before we get into some specific NBA stuff, you said you started a Twitch stream, and I've messed around on Twitch a little bit. I actually do a live show there. So give me a little bit about what you do on Twitch. I saw at least your Twitter yesterday was full of clip breakdowns. So is that what you do there?
Yeah, I basically kind of just go on go on there and set up, run through just breakdowns and stuff. I try to do kind of like a pregame show
Okay.
sort of deal. The fun thing about Twitch is it's just you.
Yep.
There is no pauses with the podcast. There's a fun back and forth, and things like that. On Twitch, it is just you, and I have I found new respect for people that host all these shows and podcasts on their own, because sometimes I'm just like, man, people got to think I'm boring.
I doubt that they think you're boring. I mean, assuming people watch.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, I just starting, and so
Exactly.
very few people are watching. I'm pretty sure no family members have even popped in yet.
That's when you get the real numbers, is when you get the family members popping in.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's when you get the fake stuff.
True. So Mo, for the first time ever, we got an NBA play-in, which both of the games yesterday being Wednesday, the Western Conference games were both pretty exciting. Even in the Eastern Conference game, the one with the Celtics, Tatum dropped 50, right?
Right.
So very exciting, which is what the NBA wanted. So 2 questions: were you a fan of the play-in game before you actually saw it, and now that you've seen it in action, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was completely kind of against it at the beginning of the year. Just thought this is really gimmicky.
Yeah,
We're hurting the value of regular season games and things like that. But just kind of seeing the run up to the playing game, I had to take a complete U-turn there and go like, nope, I was wrong. This was great. And what I mean by it is, it was a great tanking device. It doesn't fully stop tanking. Listen, Oklahoma City's was going to tank. Didn't matter. And things like that. But just when you look at the situation, like for the Washington Wizards, they're in a situation coming up on the trade deadline, and you have a guy like Bradley Beal with no plan. There's no real prospects for the season for them. They're kind of looking at it going like, man, I don't know. It might change the situation for them, and they might actually go, we got a full tank. It might change the situation for Beal going like, hey, I need to get out of here. Like, I've done everything I can. We're not going to make the playoffs again this year. And some people have been arguing, MJ, a little bit about, like, well, look, how much did the play-in matter? Because the Wizards were playing for the 8th seed last game of the regular season. The Warriors and Grizzlies were playing for the 8th seed last game of the regular season. I'm like, yes, that is very true. Those it kind of would have had a play-in type game for those final games, but I don't think we would have gotten there if there was no play-in, because I don't think Washington's really giving it a shot with how bad they started the season. I think it's just kind of undervaluing a little bit what the play-in game sort of brought to the table, the race to it. So I think it was pretty interesting, and it kept teams like Chicago was trying to go for it and stuff like that. So I think it was a success, and there's going to be years where it's going to be like, man, it ain't right. This team's in the play-in tournament, but we got to do something.
I mean, 16 teams already out of 30 in the NBA make the playoffs. So why not make it a little more exciting? Throw 4 more in there for one game. And it's not even like they're getting a whole series. It gives the teams who did, this is something that I actually liked. For the teams who did make the playoffs outright, having the play-in gives them a little extra rest.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does, and I think that's an important aspect, for those teams that aren't in the play-in, and even winning the first game in the play-in like the Lakers did, they get a couple more days of rest instead of having to worry about going into the play the second game. So I think it's a positive thing here. I actually wouldn't even mind if they gave it 2 or 3 days before we started the play-in game also, and gave those teams a chance to rest, and maybe we'd pick up the even more tension in those play-in tournaments. But listen, man, we saw the results. We saw that Golden State Laker game. Come on, man. Like, I'm still high off of it. It was from last night. I woke up this morning going like, man, that was amazing.
And I will be fully transparent. I've been a Golden State Warriors fan for a very long time. So I was watching that game, and it hurt, but at the same time, like, that is exactly what the NBA wanted. you couldn't ask for a better play-in game than LeBron versus Curry. And boy, did they deliver.
I mean, they nailed it. I don't think what's kind of funny is I don't think we'll ever have as much star power in a play-in game
No.
On both sides as we did last night. So in their inaugural play-in tournament run, like this is going to be the biggest one that they had. But it just shows that there's a lot of, like, even the players were into it and really competing. There was nobody that kind of had that mentality of like, screw it, we'll just try to get the 8 seed. You know, I felt like this thing it really had not even just a playoff intensity. Man, this felt like a game 7.
Oh yeah. And especially, and part of this is, LeBron has played the Warriors so much. He knows their offense almost as good as they do, probably at this point. Curry I think it was.
He's a video game. He's a video game. There's nothing. It's just some of the shots he makes sometimes you're just like, come on, dude.
And Vogel even said last night, Kerr was talking about they're going to throw the kitchen sink at him. We did throw the kitchen sink at him, and he still dropped 37. I mean, that is just not normal. And what they were talking about, and given your skill breaking down film, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. The way Curry moves off the ball is something that they were talking about a lot on the broadcast last night. And obviously he can make the shots, but it's his ability to pass, run circles around everyone else, and then catch and shoot. That's why you can throw the kitchen sink at him, but he just gets lost because he's so fast, and he can just keep doing that all night.
Yeah, no, it's the thing about it. The two things Curry does that most guards don't do as well. The movement off the ball is just special. And what sucks about it as a defender is like once your guy gives up the ball, you like rest for just a split second, right? Like just okay. Yeah. Or even when Curry runs to the weak side, you're just like, okay, I get a split second of, oh no, there he goes. And you're just like, oh crap. And he got KCP on that last night with a great back cut. Yeah. And everybody knows to watch for that with Curry, but the problem is it is so hard to do after playing 33 minutes and doing that. And the other thing Curry does that, I don't even think we saw much of it last night, but he does really well is screening.
Yes.
Because he has the understanding of if I set a really good screen, I'm going to open up doors for our offense, and usually for himself, because guys are going to be like, oh, wow, he just set a back screen. We have, JTA cutting now going to the basket. Like, oh, it's only 2 guys go there. Now Curry's open for a 3.
Exactly.
He has that understanding, and that's kind of the stuff that makes Curry so special.
So watching that game last night, what was impressive to me, and this is kind of looking forward, obviously the Lakers are going to contend anytime they have LeBron and AD, but the ability that Andrew Wiggins in the last few games at the end of the season, last 8 games or so, to actually be a reliable second option, and also, granted, not so much in the third and fourth quarter, but the defensive effort you saw from him in the first half was very impressive. And if I am other teams watching that, with Klay Thompson coming back next year, the Warriors possibly having 2 first-round picks, that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it does and it doesn't to me a little bit, in the sense of, Wiggins has been great. Like, he's been great defensively this year. He's been that first half of that game where he was attacking the paint and really attacking the Lakers was huge for the Warriors and helped them build that big lead. And you saw how confident he got. He started in the third quarter pulling turnaround fadeaways on LeBron, where I was like, that's just a confidence. Like, I feel so good right now. No one can stop me. And that's great. And that's the stuff people thought of him when he was going to be the number 1 pick. But the things when we're looking at next season, Klay's coming back from an Achilles injury, man. That's not easy. And the thing about the Achilles injury is it leads to other small like knocks here and there. Like, just look at the season Kevin Durant had.
Yeah.
He was great on the court when he was on the court. Your body adjusts, especially to the Achilles injury, more than any other injury. Your body has to figure out how to move again. And that's great for any of us normal people, who just live a regular life, and we're just hoping to be able to, maybe go jogging or something.
Yeah.
It's totally different when it's like, okay, but now I'm going to go play NBA level basketball.
Yeah.
And I think so I worry about putting too much on Klay at least early. And I think he's kind of alluded to saying that kind of stuff a little bit when he has spoken to the press. But they got a lot of interesting stuff that what's going to happen with the draft pick, with Minnesota's pick, with their own pick, like they're going to be in a good situation. And it wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me if they just package those picks and James Wiseman for a big piece. I wouldn't know what that would be, but there's possibilities of things that they could put together.
Do they have a shot of making a run in the playoffs at all? Given the chance that they just no.
Sorry, wow. I'm gonna just shoot it down. No. Here's the thing: they're just too small. And you kind of saw it a little bit with the Lakers coming back. If the Lakers were fully healthy, like LeBron did look good in the first half. Was moving very poorly. When they face like a healthy, let's assume they beat the Grizzlies, which I still think is going to be a bit of a toss-up. But if they beat them, then they go play Utah. And they do well against Utah, and their small size might affect them. But I don't think they can do that much. In a 7-game series, I think I would just still pick Utah, who's been solid defensively, shoots the ball well, moves the ball, and they're just much more disciplined than the Warriors. And the Warriors, who've been great defensively, still depending on a lot of young guys that I don't trust. Look at Juan Toscano-Anderson, had a big first half, really kind of disappeared in the second half. Like there's still young guys that they got to work through, whereas the Jazz are veterans. So I kind of think they're going to be a first round out.
So on the other side of that, with the Lakers, as you said, still LeBron messing with that ankle. He got poked in the eye last night, apparently. And just a side note, that quote after the game where he's talking about seeing 3 rims, he could not have been more dramatic about that.
That's LeBron. That's fine. I'm okay with it. That's what we're gonna do. He was super dramatic when he was on the floor. Like, I'm okay with it. This is entertainment, guys. Like, what are we gonna do?
Like I said, I'm a Warriors fan. So when I'm watching big games like that, I will be honest, I am not impartial at all. I was like screaming at him. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're fine. Like, I thought he hurt his ankle at first. And then he's on the floor and he's like, I would have come back and put a pirate patch on.
Well, I actually originally thought he had hit his head on the floor when he landed.
I did too.
And I was like, oh wow, that might, and at that point I was like, he might be concussed.
Yeah.
And then when I saw the replay, I was like, oh no,
he's fine.
Now, I mean, getting poked in the eye sucks.
No, yeah, it does.
And all of that. And I think some of it was, hey, trying to get a flagrant call and stuff. And I'm not totally convinced it wasn't a flagrant foul, just in the pure sense of you got him in the head and they're saying he was going for the ball. But like when I look, my view of it from the replay was like he put his arms out once LeBron was already the ball was already above even Draymond's head.
Yeah, it was a delayed. The arms were in the correct position, but it was slightly delayed.
And kind of situation. So I was surprised they didn't call it flagrant, but that's I'm still on the fence of where that goes. And my friends in the group chat and I got in a nice argument about it. But that's but in that sense, that's just who LeBron is. You can't really go through it. But just like, because I kind of figure where you're heading, even with LeBron kind of hurt, we saw what he could do in the second half, right? Like once he got going, it was like, oh no, LeBron's taking over. And I mean, when he shot that haymaker prayer 3, I had no doubt it was going in.
Oh yeah, I knew.
I was just like, oh no, this is falling, and it's just kind of LeBron. And he had big moments, dropping some great passes to Caruso, cutting and things like that. Like, it just shows you, like, once he kind of gets into that rhythm, he's one of the best in the world.
So, I mean, it's interesting. I think it was Jared Dudley was saying they have one of the hardest paths to the championship this year, which, other than actually being in the play-in, I don't really buy, because you're the reigning champs and you have LeBron and Anthony Davis. So, Mo, what are your thoughts on just their chances? Are they in your mind the favorite, or are the record favorites Utah and Phoenix? Do they have better shots than the Lakers?
No, I think the Lakers are the favorites to come out. And I've kind of been saying it, like, look, you give me a healthy LeBron and AD, and even LeBron at like 80, 85% in the first round. I got to think they're at least getting to the conference finals. The other team I think that's really a threat that nobody really talks about is the Clippers.
Yeah.
And I get it with all the drama last year and all that stuff, but the Clippers are super talented, and I think they can do it. So I think we're going to get the LA conference finals we've been hoping for.
Ooh.
And
I would love to see that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. I think that's sort of what we're coming up on, and we should get ready for that, because that's exactly I think what we're going to see. Um, if I was a betting man, and nobody should bet the money or the farm based on stuff I say, I'm
No.
generally a moron. But if I were to bet, I'd probably bet that would be the conference finals.
Yeah, I think it would be. There's been some injuries that have changed the landscape a little bit, because I think Donovan Mitchell practiced with the Jazz for the first time today in a while. Jamal Murray's the Nuggets have had a lot of injuries. I would like them a lot more if they were healthier, because they don't have Murray. I want to say Will Barton was struggling with injuries. I mean, they've just been knocked down a peg there. My last Western Conference focused question before we move to the East real quick. And this is, again, me just mostly being a fan. It seems that Jokic is winning the MVP by a landslide, which I'm not surprised. Did you think that he should have been such almost a unanimous MVP from what we've seen so far?
I think so. And the reason why I just think it's Jokic kind of hands down is look at what he's done all season, and he's played every game.
Yep.
Right. And here's my deal. If Embiid played 10 more games, I might actually give it to Joel Embiid.
Okay.
But, he just didn't play enough. He missed 18 games. And yes, it sucks because he missed some of those games because of COVID protocols and
Right.
wasn't injured and those things.
Yeah.
That's the way this goes sometimes. It unfair, and stuff like that. But, if LeBron doesn't get his high ankle sprain, he was one of the favorites to win the MVP in that sense. And who knows how that plays. But Jokic has been consistent all year long and played every game. I don't know how you can not give it to him. And I know there's arguments and stuff, and people don't want to hold injuries against guys, but I go, he's just been so good. There's no real way for me to think anybody else deserves it over him.
So then with Embiid, one of the MVP candidates, like you said, they have the 1 seed, although that's probably just because the Nets were not healthy the entire season. You give them a full healthy season, they're probably number 1 in the East. Who's your favorite over there?
It's kind of funny. I think I'm going to go with Philly. And I think it's the big reason why is just look at their path to the finals. They're going to play either Washington or Indiana in the first round. And to be honest, that might be tougher for them than their next opponent, which is going to be either Atlanta or New York in the second round.
Yeah.
When you look at what both Brooklyn and Milwaukee got to go through, I mean, Brooklyn's going to have an easy first round against Boston. I don't think Boston's going to hold up.
No.
But, I think Milwaukee's also going to beat Miami. So then they got to face each other in the second round. And if you're Brooklyn, if Milwaukee loses, you're facing Miami in the second round. Like, that's a tough road to go through that. And then you're probably going to be facing Philly, who, if they handle everything properly, should be waiting for them in the conference finals.
Very rested, yeah.
Yeah, and should be a rested team and things like that. Like, I just think that road, I was kind of always telling friends, I said, whoever finishes 1 in the East is probably going to come out of the East, just because the road itself is so much easier.
And it's interesting watching the way that the Sixers have been built. The biggest frustration in the last few years was they didn't surround Simmons and Embiid with shooters. And then they went out and got Curry and Danny Green, who, as much as Danny Green kind of got made fun of on the internet for missing that wide open 3 last year in the finals, he's a very good 3-point shooter. So honestly, I mean, the way, even if you want to compare it to the Bucks seem to have regressed a little bit after making that big deal for Jrue Holiday, which gave up a lot of their depth and a lot of their shooting. So honestly, I like Philadelphia just because of their depth over everything. I think they win the bench minutes over Brooklyn or Milwaukee if they get to that point.
I mean, the one concern I have about Philly, and it's a big one, is just kind of their half court perimeter offense.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of why the whole, like, it would have been great if they got Kyle Lowry, was such a big deal, just because you would feel much more confident in that sense. I like the guys they have. They finally built a roster around those two guys that made sense. For years they didn't, and it was so awkward, especially last season with Horford. But I think that's going to be kind of the one thing we got to keep an eye on. But they're also just so damn good defensively, and they may not score much, but if you put Matisse Thybulle and Ben Simmons on the floor together, and then Embiid as the back line, that's tough to score on. And that's and that's even for Brooklyn. And that's going to be the challenging thing. The one thing I'd say, because I want to push a little bit back a little bit on Milwaukee, the numbers and everything, they don't compare to what they were the past two seasons in the regular season.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing from Milwaukee, because they experimented a little bit more, have a better understanding of that. I won't be surprised to see them changing up their defenses in between games, and maybe even in games. They look much more comfortable with it. They sacrifice some wins to try to figure this thing out and learn on the fly. And so I think, I'm going to give you one that I think is going to be pretty big here. Is I think Milwaukee is going to beat Brooklyn in the second round.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, I kind of like the way they match up. I think when you have guys like Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and PJ Tucker, I think you can put those three guys on the the Brooklyn big three, and have Giannis as kind of the safety. That's tough. And I'm not saying like, they're going to shut down Brooklyn's offense. They just got to stop them enough.
True.
Because I don't know how much Brooklyn's going to stop them on the other end. So they just got to come up with literally just enough stops, and I think, all three of their games this year, and only once did all three of the Brooklyn's big three play. But in all three of those games, they all came essentially down to the wire.
Yeah.
And I think that's, a telling sign there. I think that's a lot closer than people want to give it credit for.
And I know this has been a big discussion, like who takes the last shot, anything like that. I don't think that inherently matters. I think that's whoever's open. I mean, will they probably be an ISO? Maybe. But I think the bigger deal is, and this may be controversial, I don't know. If I was running that team, and granted, I'm not a genius basketball mind, this is more me thinking in like 2K mode, I guess. I would put one of them on the bench, not necessarily play them less minutes, but I would make sure that, say, James Harden came in once Kyrie and KD were done in the first rotation, something like that. Because it would be, and granted, I've not watched a lot of Brooklyn minutes, and I'm sure that's how they do it throughout the game. But even just at the beginning, to survive the KD and Kyrie minutes, and then have James Harden come on the floor with DeAndre and the bench. I don't know. I think, to me, spacing it out more, because when all three of them are on the floor, it's terrifying. But again, as everybody's been saying, there's only one ball.
Yeah, there's always been only one ball. I think
Right.
I think when we kind of say that, that's a little bit of a cop out. And let me be clear, I've definitely have said it on more than one occasion. Like I'm not one to really go at anybody for that. But I think you do start those three guys, and then from there you kind of build out the rotation by taking out either Kyrie or Harden a little early, maybe at like the 6-minute mark of the first quarter, and then bring them back in the last 2 minutes of that quarter for the other guy. But I think they will always be able to have one or two of those guys on the floor together, and then in crunch time they're going to have all three, and I think they'll be fine. The way they move the ball, and we have to give them credit. Harden has done a phenomenal job being even more of a distributor than with the Rockets. And, I kind of get a little heat because, he was a different passer with the Rockets than he is with the Nets. And it's a very subtle view, but in the sense of with the Rockets, it was kind of like he was always looking for his first.
Yes.
But with the Nets, I feel like it's more balanced. And then, Kyrie, as much as everybody wants to not like him and give him a hard time for stuff and things like that. He accepted the role of like, yo, that's you. You're the point guard, James.
Yeah.
I'll be the two guard, and maybe we don't want to give him credit for making that decision, which is something that, people were concerned about when Harden was coming, was how is Kyrie going to handle it? And then you have KD, who's just a freak.
Yeah.
7-foot guard, basically.
Yeah.
Can get his shot off anyway and things like that, and meshes perfectly with that. So I think they'll be fine on the offensively. I think they're going to be fine. I think defensively, having not played together so much, I think they've only played 8 games together at this point. That's where I'm concerned about it. And I think, not having those reps together on the defensive end of the court is really going to hurt them.
So, Mo, I think my last question for you before I have you make some NBA Finals predictions is about the New York Knicks. I think they were – I saw the betting odds the other day at the beginning of the season for them to even make the playoffs, and I wish I would have put some money on that.
We all do.
Yeah.
None of us saw that one coming.
So now being the 4 seed, home playoff games in Madison Square Garden, first of all, just from like a basketball purist perspective, how excited does that make you? And then what sort of playoff hope do Knicks fans have?
It's great. NBA basketball is great when the Knicks are good.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're not even that good right now. Right? We've just gotten a taste and everybody's losing their mind. We've seen the videos of Knicks fans running in the street. We're 500. We're 500. Like they're literally celebrating that. Like that's impressive. Yeah. So, it is fun when the Knicks are good, and there's so much history in the Garden, playoff history and things like that. It's fun for that. Like, forget about just on the Knicks end. Like if you're Trae Young, you got to be salivating. I get to play my first playoff game in the Garden. Like if I have a big night, like this can go down historically, like Steph Curry's rise started in the Garden. Yeah. When he had that phenomenal performance, I think it was 54 points or something like that. That matters. And I think that kind of moves on in that sense. So it's just kind of in the nostalgic sort of way. It's great. I think the Knicks Hawks series is a toss-up. Both teams are relatively inexperienced. I think it gets really interesting in the sense of like the Hawks have not been able to stop Julius Randle, this season. And I think it gets different. It's interesting when teams are able to scout Randle in more depth and in more details as they prepare for the playoffs. So maybe Atlanta will throw a few different things at him and see how he handles it. I think the Knicks prospects, I think they got a pretty good chance of getting out of the first round. I don't think they have a chance to get into the conference finals.
Yeah.
But they got it. I think for me, it's 50-50, and it's going to be a really fun series to watch.
So last thing for you, Mo, I want your team out of the West, your team out of the East, and your NBA Finals champion prediction. Okay. Knowing absolutely nothing about the play-in games tomorrow.
And everybody's going to hold it against me. I'm going to pick Indiana and the Warriors. Not just kidding. There you go. No, I think I'm going to go relatively easy and go Lakers, Sixers.
Okay.
And I think in a surprise, I think it's going to be the Sixers beating the Lakers in the finals. I don't think the Lakers can guard Joel Embiid, even with all the big guys that they got. I think he'll just foul them out. It'll be a tight series though, because the one thing that makes me nervous about not picking the Lakers is if LeBron gets his chance at 5, I don't know if he's really going to, he literally might lose an eye to try to win that one. So I think I am a little bit nervous about picking the Sixers, but I think I'm just going to go with Philly there.
You jumped on my last follow-up question, which is if LeBron did lose that series, how crazy would Jordan fans go if he lost to the Sixers?
They're going to go as crazy as they always have, right? Yeah. Like I think, it's a hard debate in that sense, right? It's what do you value? What do you care about? Is it rings? Right. Jordan never lost the finals. Yeah, but LeBron's been to like 30 of them. It feels like, you got to think at some point he was going to lose some, and some of the teams he took to the finals, we're like, woof, these are rough teams. and 8 straight of them is pretty impressive. And I think there's in that sense. So I think, listen, if you're gonna pick, if you're a Jordan fan, there's nothing LeBron's ever gonna be able to do, that's gonna make you pick and say LeBron's better than Jordan. If you're a LeBron fan, you're going to, every time he does something, go, see, he did that, like I heard the thing of like, look, man, he's the only player to have won, star player to have won 3 championships with 3 different teams. And I'm like, that's not really a metric,
No, that just means he left multiple times.
Yeah, I just think it's like, okay, that's great, that's nice, but like that doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of how great of a player he is. So and I'm a fan, and I'll be honest with you, you can ask me for 5 days in a row which one's the best, and I'm just gonna flip-flop constantly. It's just like,
so hard to determine different eras, because then if you go into the Kareem, the Wilt, and
Bill Russell, you have so many guys we could start going into,
like if championships are really the metric, then Bill Russell, it's so hard to determine. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, so I just, I just want to enjoy him.
Yeah,
I was a kid when Jordan was playing. I got to enjoy him. I just want to enjoy LeBron now, and now that I have kind of a little more understanding of the game, it's even more fun, And I wish I had that understanding as a kid watching Jordan, and I like it when I go back to watch some of his stuff. But it's just fun, man. Like, let's just enjoy him while we got him.
Exactly. Enjoy, just as everybody. I mean, Twitter was exploding last night with the Warriors-Lakers game, and just enjoy the greatness while you have it. And I think Steph was the one who said, all-time greats make all-time great plays. So enjoy it while you get to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect way to end it.
Perfect. Well, Mo, thank you very much for coming out and doing this. Before I let you go, give the good people where they can find you, where they can find all your work, Twitter, whatever it may be.
Easiest thing to do is just follow me on Twitter, MODAKHIL_NBA. That's the same handle for Instagram. That's the same handle for Twitch. You can find me on that stuff. I'm constantly tweeting out things. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know everything I'm doing, including how bad my runs have been that week.
Are you a big runner?
I run because I eat like crap, and I need to. This is kind of the main thing. Yeah, so that's why I run, and then I post it up there so everybody can be like, "Damn, you slow."
That's why I play basketball, and that's the reaction people have when I play basketball too.
Yeah. Perfect.
Well, perfect. Thank you very much, Mo. And I'll definitely be checking out some of your live streams.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
And a big thank you to Mo Dahkil for coming on the show. Founder of jumpball.net, works for Bleacher Report, works for The Athletic. He's worked for the Clippers, Spurs, and Australian men's basketball. So a guy of many hats who has done a lot of things, and I definitely appreciate your insight, sir. So thank you for that conversation. Thank you for coming on the show. Hopefully everybody enjoyed his words. Well, folks, that is all I have for you today. I've gone on a little Packers rant. I've gone on a little Warriors rant. We'll get to the Oakland days in a little bit. I'm going to do some work on getting some baseball people on here for you. That'll probably be the next episode. So with that, thank you everybody for watching. If you're new to the YouTube channel, please like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please like the show, subscribe, leave a review, all of that those wonderful actions that help the podcast and help the channel grow. So I appreciate you all for watching, listening. Let me know things you would like moving forward. Thank you to my editor, Richie, for helping out on the YouTube channel. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everybody who helps me out in various different ways. So we are back for the summer. We're going to have some great stuff coming at you in the weeks to come. So thank you again, everybody, for watching, and I'll talk to you next week.